Janice, looks like we can get started.
Okay, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our Zoom opportunity today. Today we're doing another session in our series about starting your own business and learning from some of those experts who've already been in the business field. What I'd like for everybody to know that this session is being recorded and it's going to be available for you after the session that you can share it on social media. If you have comments or suggestions, please take the time to put them in the comment box. We also ask that everyone that's not a part of the panel to please put your phones or your devices on mute so that we don't have any background noise. As always, we do have a disclaimer for today. The information that's provided during this session should not be considered as legal advice, but we do encourage you to consult legal counsel as it pertains to your unique situation. My name is Janice Presley, and I'm serving as your moderator today, and very excited to have a distinguished group of women here who are also entrepreneurs who've been very successful in starting their own businesses. What I'm going to do is basically give a brief introduction for each of our panelists today. When I acknowledge you, would you please just kind of wave to the folks in TV land, and then as I call your name, and then we'll give some additional information for you to be able to introduce yourselves. So first off, I'd like to welcome our host for this series and the owner of and CEO of Mann HR Consulting Group.
Hello, everybody.
Veretta Yancey. She's an HR consultant with almost 20 years of experience, from where she was a training manager to now consulting in most areas of human resources. One of the programs she recently put together aligns big ideas with business practices. IDEAS is the acronym for Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Accessibility, and Service. She opened her first brick and mortar, Treasures Paradise, and pitched the idea on Shark Tank. Welcome, Veretta.
Thank you.
Our next person is Ms. Katie Brown, is the owner and operator of the HR Office. She launched her consulting agency in August of 2020, based in Ohio. She's a dedicated human resource manager, a professional, that has been in the industry for over 15 years. She has a passion for elevating organizations to reach their fullest potential by hiring the best, training the best, and retaining the best. As our newest business owner, we want to hear her thoughts around planning and implementing the business to actually launching this month. So welcome, Katie.
Thank you, guys.
We also have Ms. Alana Mann, is the managing partner of Chasseur, a clothing line in Los Angeles. She first started a clothing business as a high school student and was recognized as an up-and-coming woman-owned business in Chicago right out of college. She started several businesses that have included men's shoes, catering vegan delectables, website design, and branding. That means she's multi-talented. And we're happy to have her here to talk about her ventures and hear how she's inspired. Welcome, Alana.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here.
Great. Ms. Van Zant founded My HR Consulting in 2019 and has provided human resource consulting and recruitment services to numerous companies throughout the U.S. She's over a decade of experience in technical and executive recruitment, diversity and inclusion programs, management development, and supervisory training programs. She's an active member of SHRM and the Human Resource Association of Central Connecticut. Welcome, Ms. Shonda.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
So what we'd like to do today is to take a little bit of time to answer a few questions. We do have some, pre-given questions about things that are pertaining to our topic today. But what I'd like for you to each do is to take a little bit of time, tell us something different other than what I've already talked about for your business, and then maybe give us a favorite client story. So we'll start with Ms. Yancey.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Janice. And thank you, everybody, for attending today. As she mentioned, I'm Veretta, and I'm happy to be here. I'm so excited to share just the practical tips to get your business ideas off the ground. And as one of the stories, I think that one of my favorite stories is around right after we found out that we would be settling in for the COVID pandemic. I had talked to a friend of mine who is a caterer and event planner here in Los Angeles. And as I was on my way to the grocery store, I was literally complaining to her and saying, now that they're shutting down all of these restaurants, I'm thinking you should probably just have a restaurant coming out of your kitchen, and we could just drive through and pick up a meal and actually, have a decent meal, without going to McDonald's or something like that. And here it is 6 months later, she launched it right away. And now I look forward to at least a couple of days a week of going through there and enjoying some of her great great meals. And I'm not going to say that it's definitely, but it's the best for you, but it's definitely good and tasty. And it was profitable for her during this time. So we'll talk about how you can be creative, you know, in times when you have to shift. So
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you. Shonda, if you go next.
Yeah, so when I originally started my HR, my focus was to partner with small to medium-sized businesses to give them executive level, all-inclusive HR services. And then I partnered with my marketing consultant in July, who was really able to guide me into what sector I really wanted to be in, which I found healthcare was my forte. So now I am primarily focused on healthcare, small to medium-sized businesses, or large organizations. I think my favorite HR story to share is the time I had an executive level candidate that was meeting with the CEO, and he fell asleep while the CEO was actually giving him the history of the company, and they woke him up and he apologized, but he did not get hired. So
Wow.
Talk about sleeping on a job.
Yeah, sleeping on the interview.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, thanks for sharing, Shonda. Let's go
No
with Katie.
problem.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to this lovely event. I was super excited to get the invitation. I'm happy to be one of the youngest HR consultants that started their first agency. I'm excited to hear everybody else's story and their journey. With Ohio, we're very heavily unionized. And while I do provide the full gamut of HR, I think one of my niches is that I bring a lot of labor relations experience. I've always worked with large organizations that's had 7+ labor unions. So with that skill, I hope to be able to gain clients who may be small business owners, but do still have small unions to kind of take that out of their hands to be able to manage, because it's a lot to be able to manage. Trust me, I've been there. So I want to be able to take that out of their hands and definitely provide the full gamut of HR. I will, instead of sticking with a HR story from my previous life, living in a corporation, I'll talk about something most recently is trying to seal a deal with a new client, a potential client. It was my first client negotiation. So of course, negotiating anything when it relates to monetary value is a difficult discussion. But this one became more difficult because I think that we were both headed in a direction that wasn't the same. I remember her saying, you know, send me a proposal and be creative. And that word, be creative, kind of sparked me as odd. So instead of being creative, I said, you know what, I'm going to stick to my guns. I'm a new business owner. These are my prices. My prices are set. So I'm only going to be creative in the ways in which you can pay me. So I decided to send her that proposal. And we went through this song and dance to eventually she ended up kind of quoting a very small price. And I finally had to come down and say, what's your budget? And it struck me as odd, and this will probably stay with me forever, when she said, I was thinking $200 a month. And I was like, $200 a month
wow.
to do payroll, to do your recruiting, to come up with a 1099 onboarding policy.
Wow.
To answer your emails, do what?
That was my first potential client, my first negotiation, and it was also my first no. So if I can impede any advice on anybody in the audience is, you know your value, right? This is the value that I bring. And although first client, it's very tempting to say yes, there's going to be a lot of times where you have to say no. So that's my funny story.
And that was definitely some great advice. And so now we're going to speak with the serial entrepreneur, Miss Alana. You're muted.
Here we go. Sorry about that. So hi, yes, I'm Alana. And basically, I'm here because I've been doing business my whole life. I think my mother, who's actually on this panel as well, designed it that way, but I don't regret any second of it, and I couldn't really imagine being any other way, to be honest with you. I started my first business technically when I was 14 years old. I finished my first business plan at 15, and with that, it was for a business competition. It took me about 3 years to get that same business plan to a place where I could win at the national level. And so at 3 years in senior year of high school, I was able to get a scholarship through that. And I was able to learn really like what's important in terms of building a business, what the absolute fundamental basics are that you must really do, not to only to be respected, but to be able to know where you're going long term and if you should continue going, because not every idea you have is a business. And so that's probably one of the first things I learned, because I mean, now fast forward 15 years later and I'm still doing the same thing, but in no way is that business plan, does it look the same as it did 15 years ago. And so that's one of my favorite parts about a business plan, is that it's a work in progress and it kind of follows you in the direction you're going, but it also allows you to make concrete goals and, you know, adapt as well as changing times. For instance, right now, COVID, we started doing clothing, but just because of COVID, we went from 100% of our business being clothing to like 80% of our business being masks. And that's not something I ever expected to do, but at the same time, it was profitable, and I just had to get with the program in order to stay with the times.
Right. All right. Well, thank you so much, Alana. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people are talking about right now, is being able to pivot. And so don't be so stuck in whatever, business that you're in, to realize that there may be a little bit of a different opportunity or different spin on what you've been doing. So what again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. I'd like to go through some specific questions for each of you. And I'll start again with Veretta. If you can tell us a little bit about your journey to being a business owner, and what advice would you give those that are trying to start a business and really don't know where to start?
Thank you. So let's start with, I believe that I have an entrepreneur spirit that's kind of flowing through my bloodline. And if you just heard from my daughter, you'll know that so I'm fourth generation business owner, and I didn't start my business until actually my job was eliminated. And that's when they brought me back as a consultant with them. And that's when as a 1099. And so after I saw what that type of work entailed, and just in doing the project work in general, I realized that I enjoyed that flexibility. I liked that whole idea of becoming an expert in a specialized skill. And I had, the opportunity to focus in on one particular project. And so I would say the interesting part, though, is dealing with multiple clients, and that's obviously having to juggle, those clients. But I think that for me, it was, I believe that I'm succeeding in it because I'm self-directed, also just having a certain level of discipline and organization. And I'm that person that I don't necessarily have to go into the office throughout the week. I will say, to answer the second part of your question, so a couple of years ago, I started a nonprofit to help people start a business using the project delivery model. And so I kind of appreciate that methodology, which gives people a formal process to start the business from the idea all the way to the implementation. And so I would say the first thing is to start with your idea, formulate that idea, and talk to people about it. You want to make sure that you have a market and that you have a demand for the product. And then I would say, think about the things that you do for fun. Think about the things that people praise you about, whether it's baking a cake or or being a walking fashion statement. What types of things that you are passionate about? And those, if you start with those things, then the business part will come natural. but you still have to be concerned with the business of the business. And so that's one of the areas in consulting that I do, is to help people formulate the business part of their business. It's one thing to be really good at what you do, but it's another part that and you know that, when COVID hit and they started issuing, grants and funds to organizations, many organizations, small businesses weren't eligible because they didn't deal with the business of their business, and that's the financials and all of that other piece. But the first thing that I would say is use either a consultant or use a free resource like SCORE. Somebody like me may charge you 25 to 50 bucks an hour, but it's worth it because at least you can start to put a plan together before you really get into huge investments in your money and into trying to figure out what you're going to do with your business. The other thing that I was going to say is do your research. Research your business. We refer to it as a SWOT analysis. And so that's looking at from the internal perspective, you're looking at your strengths and your weaknesses, but then externally, you're looking at your opportunities and strengths. So take the time to do your research. You will definitely save time and money in the short term. And you'll also, I would say, don't be afraid to connect with your competitors. Most people enjoy sharing things with you, and they will share mistakes that they made or pitfalls that they had. They will share those pros and cons. So in your SWOT analysis, you will identify those opportunities, which means I need to expand my business. And Alana talked about that. So her opportunity was adding masks to her production, right? A threat would be somebody who's going to be able to mass produce those same masks. But then again, she has to look at what differentiates her mask from somebody else's. So I can't stress it enough. Just before you spend your money, do the research and write down your SWOT analysis, and that starts your plan. So thanks.
Got it. Thank you. Definitely some great advice. Shonda, if you would talk about your role as a consultant, many people starting out have questions like, how do I set my prices? Are there high startup costs? Can you kind of talk about that aspect of your particular business?
Yeah, thank you, Janice. So I will say that I think we can all agree that this was the hardest thing to figure out, is how much to charge people, right? Because you don't want to sell yourself short, like Katie said, and you also don't want to overcharge a client and lose potential business. So I really had to do like a deep dive analysis in my professional network and reach out to people, kind of like you said, Veretta, and figure out what they're doing. And what I found is it really depends on how you value yourself. Mm-hmm. You always have to keep in mind that people are going to pay for expertise. They're not really paying for service. They're paying for your education, your years of experience. That's why they're paying you. Another good thing I learned from that group is to really take whatever, if you're currently working, to take that current base salary or your former base salary, get the hourly rate from that. So divide it by 20/80 if you're working 40 hours a week, and then times that hourly rate amount by 3. The logic behind that is because you're a consultant, right? So now you don't have any benefits like an employee has. You don't have any more paid time off benefits. You're responsible for all of your overhead costs. You're responsible for your own health care, things like that. So when you're really trying to figure out how much you should be charging people, you keep in mind, I mean, it's whatever you think your services are worth based off your expertise. Don't sell yourself short, again, because I think that the worst thing that you could do is sell yourself short. As Katie said, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're doing all of these tasks and you're being paid at minimum. The other thing is, starting up, I actually didn't spend as much as I thought it took to start up my consulting firm. So I would say that the costs were around a little under $800. And that included, paying for my website, investing in an ATS system, setting aside cost to post jobs, contracting a marketing consultant, establishing my business. So actually having my sole proprietorship established through a local attorney, and then having my certifications done through the Small Business Administration. So it was relatively low. I was surprised. So, if you're thinking about taking the jump, just understand that it's really not a lot to start your own, and take the plunge if you're ready to do so.
So there's a question and it said, did you say your base times 3? And I thought you said your hourly salary, correct?
Correct. So you would take your base, whatever your base salary is, if you are working 40 hours a week, divide that number, your base salary, times 2,080, because that's how many hours in a year. And then you're going to want to take that hourly rate and times that by 3.
Okay. All right. That's
And you know what, and let me just add to that. Some people may not be getting paid what they are actually worth. And so make sure that, and I have seen, Janice, and I'm sure you've seen it too, where they're asking people who have multiple degrees and certifications to actually work $12 and $15 an hour jobs.
Yep.
So make sure that when you are thinking about, do the market research and find out what you should be paying in that market for that, the job that you're doing, because there may be a chance that you're being underpaid. So we want to make sure that that's recognized. So.
And I was going to say too that when I came out of the technology space early in my career, and I remember one of my peers who was a SQL programmer type person, that when she decided to leave, we were working for IBM together. And when she decided to leave IBM, it was because one of her clients basically decided to hire her. And I remember her first contract with IBM, she became a millionaire because of the contract that they gave her. And at that time, 25 years ago, she was making about $300 an hour. That's what IBM was charging the client for her work. And then she decided to just go out on her own and work for the same client. And the contract that they gave her, she became a millionaire like that day.
Right.
Well, so that was the impetus for her to actually start her own business, because she realized that, IBM was paying her $40,000 a year, but they were charging the client, something a lot greater.
Exactly. And just when I was working, so, I've worked for a couple of consulting companies, from Watson Wyatt to Deloitte, Hewitt, and I look at the amount that they bill the clients, even for admins, is $125 an hour just for an admin type rate. And so for principal consultants, it could be as much as $500 an hour. So definitely do your research before you do that, because again, like Shonda was saying, you don't want to be in that situation where you're only working, you're not making any profit, you're not making any money, you're because you still have to pay your taxes, your insurance. What about your education? What about the money that you want to put in your 401k? All things need to be added in that. So the other point I was going to make too is consulting fees are rarely low. I mean, there is no overhead in that. And so that's one of the most easiest types of businesses that you can launch, especially if you can leverage your expertise and find that uniqueness, because there's a ton of consultants out there, but what is the differentiator for you?
Right. So one of the questions that's in there is talking about insurance, and the answer is yes, you do need insurance to protect yourself and also to protect the client. And if you're going to be working in a client location, there are things like, or have other people working in the client location, you have to be able to provide workers' comp insurance as well as insurance for in case you're sued or something like that. I'm going to go to the next question, and this is for Katie. Let's talk about your career path. So I understand you're about to open your business. If you want to talk about your career path, or what was the impetus for you to start your own business, recruiting and doing placement, and then a little bit about the pros and cons to doing so.
Sure. So my career path, I started in HR in 2005 as an HR assistant, and I worked my way up to a director level. Most recently, I took on a contract with a Fortune 500 Big Four firm. And when that contract came to an end, I really realized that now was the time to invest in my own dream. But the reason why I took on that contract is because I wanted to see exactly how remote HR worked. Right. So that was one of my fears. And we talked about that thus far, is really looking at the competition. Right. I want to see how this thing works. I know I want to do it, how does it work? How do you guys do virtual meetings and town halls? So I got to learn from one of the best organizations that we have. And after that contract ended, I said, you know what? Now is no better time than any, right? We're in the middle of a pandemic. Remote work is becoming increasingly supported for organizations worldwide. Not only is it being supported, it's necessary. So I think I need to step out on faith, and I need to do what has been a dream for me. There's pros and cons with that. One of the cons is that you don't have that large organizational backing as your safety net. It's all you. And that's why liability insurance was a question that was asked. It is absolutely necessary, because even though you have the experience, there's always something in HR that could trip you up where you may not make the best decision. Not only that, you still have to understand that your client is number one, right? It's their organization at the end of the day. So you may advise them to go left and they may decide to go right. And you have to make sure that you protect yourself. Now, when you're a big corporation, you have that backing, right? It doesn't fall on you as the person that made the decision. That's the scary part. But I had to make sure that I looked internally and realized that I do have a safety net, and it's within myself. I have to trust that, and I have to move forward with my dream. So I did just that. And that's why I launched my organization. And I have faith in myself. And what I will say is invest in yourself, promote yourself, brand yourself. We talked about a topic earlier, and I didn't want to interrupt, about starting your own business and how do you know if this is right for you. A lot of times you might work in corporations where there's a lot of political gain. If you realize that the individuals in that organization values you, not necessarily the rules that get passed down that you have to communicate, but they value you and the way that you handle your decision making, that's a clear indication that it's time to invest in you. Because when people follow you and will do what you're asking them to do, even though they may not agree with the larger corporate decisions, that should spark something inside of you that I was meant to do this, and I wasn't just meant to do this to fulfill someone else's dream, right? So those are the things that I'm looking inside of myself and really gearing towards that when I go to brand myself to organizations, because you're selling you in this organization.
Absolutely. Before we go to the next panelist, there's a question in here about how you get your first client. And so prior to this session started, we had a little bit of a conversation about my semi-failed entrepreneurial journey in terms of moving to a new city and then trying to establish a business. But I would say that looking back, and I were to do this again, I think before I actually went out on my own, I would make sure that I had relationships, and I started talking to people about, this is what I'm about to do. You know, we talked about websites. Social media, of course, is also a great way to do that. Joining professional organizations, especially for people who are like-minded, businesses maybe that you've worked for in the past, people that you know in the industry, and really just letting people know that you are ready, available, you know, that you're going to launch a business. So if anybody else has anything else they'd like to add about how you're getting clients, I know that, like I said, a lot of it is networking and talking to people and letting them know what you're doing. But there are some other things that you can do as a business owner to, you know, get the word out and let people know what you're doing. So let's go with Shonda, if you have something to add.
Yeah, so I'll say you actually just touched on it, which was one of my suggestions, which is reaching out to your former employers. I mean, as long as you have great relationships with them, those are going to be your best players, right? Because they've already been exposed to your working style. They know who you are. They're comfortable with you. And that's exactly what I did. I reached out to people that I already knew, you know, former supervisors, former bosses, people who believed in me before I took a next step in my career. So I'll say that has been been really beneficial to me. And also going back to the whole theme of investing in yourself, just marketing, advertisements, make sure that your professional network as well, if you do have people that are on LinkedIn, make sure they're reviewing you on your personal page as well, because people actually go and they look at that. They look to see what people are saying about you and your working style.
You know, one of the other things that I know that I did is I actually started writing articles on LinkedIn about various topics, and had I'm going to call it ghostwriter that kind of helped me make sure that my content was good. After I wrote it, they would kind of rewrite and edit for me. And so I thought that was pretty effective. It didn't necessarily turn into business, but at least it was able to get my words out. And then a lot of people are doing videos and different things like that on, you know, current topics and different things like, you know, the whatever moment or whatever it is. What about you, Katie? What are some of the things that you're doing to kind of let people know about your business?
So you know what? I know we're in the middle of a pandemic, but you know, I live in Ohio, so we have a very traditional workforce here. You got to get boots to the ground, right? You got to knock on doors. You got to introduce yourself, and you have to sell yourself. You have to make them a believer in your brand, because if you don't believe in you, they're not going to believe in you. So a lot of times, and I realize having the best website, the best social media site, while it's great to brand yourself, it may not gain you clients, because your clients may not be on social media. So sometimes you got to knock on those doors, and trust me, that could be a hard thing to do, is to go into an organization unannounced and say, this is why you should maybe switch what your current infrastructure for HR is, or one, why you should think about bringing me on to your infrastructure, especially with small companies, because in their eyes, you know, I have very little overhead. You know, I have a cousin who's doing my hiring. I have my mother who's responded to EEOCs, and it's worked for me. So now you have to sell why that could be a risk, and why bringing you on is really as an insurance for your organization to make sure that you're safe from risk. So I'm a true believer on boots on the ground.
Okay. Veretta, what about you?
Yeah, so I would say networking for sure. Also manage your expectation around your family and friends. So everybody's not going to buy into your dream and your vision, especially old school with me. You know, people feel like, girl, why can't you just work that traditional job? You got a good, you always had a good job, you know, doing, you know what? And so everybody doesn't necessarily believe in your dream, nor do they feel comfortable enough to recommend you. And
that's true.
I think leveraging your own network, like, you know, like they said, using the people that you've already worked with, they've already seen that you're able to perform, you're able to deliver, they know what type of style you have. So using them to either be a reference for you and bringing in work to you. So I would say that's probably the best thing. The other thing that I was going to say is utilize the networks. So whether it's, you know, SCORE, which I mentioned before, whether it's a meetup, different types of networking groups. So whatever field that you're in, you definitely should be a part of that that group outside, you know, just to meet people and look for ways to partner, look for ways to collaborate. And that's one of the things. So I know, you know, this session is sponsored by HR for All People, and that is a collaboration of HR professionals who've decided we want to get together, we want to stay connected, and if we can partner with some business, then we will do that. And so it's kind of like a collaborative, I think is the best way to describe it. The other thing that I was going to say is make sure that you have people who can write references for you, that they can speak on your work. And because as you start to write RFPs and those types of things, companies want to know who's done business with you. I was putting in on a supplier diversity site yesterday, and they asked me, who is your, not only did they say, who is your competitor? So that means I need to know who my competitors are. But they also said, and this is, you know, online, who is your competitor and what can you do that your competitor isn't doing?
Mm.
So that, when a company has to decide between, you and somebody else, you want to make sure that you have your act together.
Okay. So Alana, what kind of things have you done to help promote your business or to get your clients? And you're muted.
Is this, it cut out for a second? Was that directed towards me?
Yes.
Yeah, we're talking about marketing. So for
Yes.
me, I totally believe in the concept of a walking billboard, as well as, me, basically in your daily life. I think that it should really be a part of, your conversation. So, I mean, we hear the term elevator pitch all the time, and well, maybe not all the time, but I think it's something that we should focus more on. For instance, if you're literally in the elevator with someone and you're wearing your shirt, for example, like I have on my shirt right now for our brand, what kinds of, I mean, just wearing the shirt alone can actually be a topic of conversation in itself. In fact, I would say, if I had to throw a percentage out there, I would say 60% of our business comes from actually being out and about, wearing our clothing. It sparks conversation. And then at the same time, having the speech, so to call, ready to be able to explain that. I believe it also depends on what kind of your business you're doing. I'm in the clothing industry, so for me, anyone could be a customer, period. And I really do look at it that way. I'm also a people person, so that helps. But in my everyday interactions, it's always, I won't even say it's in the back of my mind, it's actually in the forefront of my mind. How can I start a conversation with someone? And at the same time, as my mother mentioned about filling needs, we also think of that in terms of our marketing. What are people going to talk about at home? Like, what is someone going to want to take a picture of when they see it, and if they're going to want to share that themselves. And so a big part of our marketing is wearing the clothes, as well as, having other people wear the clothes too.
One thing that I was going to add to what you said too is knowing where your audience is. And so Donna's audience, a lot of her audience is in Instagram. And what I'm finding—
I was going to talk about that.
Oh, okay. My audience in Facebook, I'm not getting business from Facebook. And so I use it as a format to share, what I'm doing, but that's not where I'm getting my primary audience. So I would say, make sure that you're doing the research to find out who are the people that you're trying to attract for business and where do they go. And I suspect if you're doing HR consulting, it's going to be LinkedIn as well as Twitter.
Absolutely. And as I say, even when you're putting together the business plan, and there's a lot of other resources through the Small Business Administration and other community type organizations where there's free classes. And so where you're trying to become an entrepreneur, it's really worth the time and effort to put the time in to create a business plan, to have people look over your business plan to see if it makes sense to them, especially other entrepreneurs, maybe either in your industry or outside of your industry, because those are the things that are really help you, be successful. Another question. So Shonda, let's talk about certifications and how you're able to leverage those for government and corporate contracts. And which ones do you have, and were they necessary when you first got started?
Yeah. So I will say that being certified as a woman-owned business has been beneficial for me. Some corporations tend to seek out women-owned business for projects first, simply because they're trying to diversify their suppliers, or sometimes because it comes with tax incentives, or they're trying to show their employee workforce that they're actually engaged in diversity and inclusion. When I went through the process for myself, I actually went through the local SBA, the Small Business Administration chapter here in Hartford, Connecticut, and they really helped me navigate a challenging process, not only just with certifications, but there were so much more other resources that they were able to provide. So another piece of advice I can give listeners right now is to really reach out to that SBA chapter within your state and ask them, what can you help me with? How can you guide me? Going back to this, I think I highly encourage anybody seeking any certifications to connect with the SBA chapter. And I don't think it's absolutely necessary for you to do, but I would say that I I think I found it to be very beneficial. So if you're looking to get that certification and you're looking for somebody to give you the support to do so, you definitely go ahead and connect with them to help you.
Correct. And a lot of those resources are actually free, right?
Yes, and
You're
that was
low
the best
cost.
part too.
Right.
Yes.
Right. And when I was going to add on to what she was saying about the SBA, so there are chapters that are specifically for women and minorities. And so just linking in with those groups, they give you free training. And because they're sponsored by the government and local agencies, a lot of it is zero cost or very minimum. And depending on the program that you're in, you also get the opportunity to network outside the organization. They partner you up with mentors and they help you with different things. And I went through it when I had, and I'll talk a little bit about another business that I had, and I went through that process with them, and they're very helpful. And lots of experience in there, and it really does cut some of the time that you have in getting started. There's a certification for the minority business as well as women. There's one for veterans. There's another one, I believe, for disabled veterans. So quite a few. And then, of course, everybody is eligible for a small business certification, which I think the number is like $20 million or something of revenue. So many of us qualify for that to be called a small business.
Right. Exactly. All right. So Katie, so everybody knows that we're in the middle of COVID-19 and we are probably going to be in it for a few more months until a vaccine happens or we decide we're going to shut the country down or shut the world down actually so that we can be over this. So it's considered to be pretty brave of you to start a business during this, in the middle of this pandemic. So kind of talk to us about people like you who are thinking I'm in corporate America, maybe I just got laid off, but I've always wanted to start my own business. Kind of what's the, what's the magic time to start doing something, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah, so I look at this question as twofold. It's definitely still scary starting a business in the midst of a pandemic, but honestly, this is the best time because we are starting to leverage virtual tools to make managing a business necessary, right? So just take this Zoom meeting, for instance. We probably wouldn't have thought, hey, I can invite an audience to do a panel discussion through Zoom, right? But we're using these features now, Microsoft Teams, House Party, FaceTime. We're using all of these tools and they're using these tools for a variety of reasons now. So now is the time, especially when you're looking to start an organization for consulting, because you do your consulting face-to-face and you can use these platforms to your advantage. The other piece of this question I look at through a quote, right? So there was a quote that was being shared around social media, and I'd love to share it with the audience because it's something that I keep on me. I keep it on my phone. I've written it down. I've put it on my mirror because it motivates me to jumpstart my consulting agency. And the quote is, stop letting your potential go to waste because you don't feel ready enough. There are people with half your talent making serious waves while you're still waiting to feel ready. In so many words, you're never going to feel ready. Trust me, I have 15 years. I've reached an executive level. And in my eyes, I would probably think I was going to start a consulting company maybe when I got in my 50s, right? Because in my head, that's how much time I'm going to need to feel ready. But then I'm watching my competitors who have less experience than I do and less exposure than I do who are making serious waves. So why not jump in the pool myself and see how wet I can get? And that's exactly what I've done. And I'm happy to be on this platform and see people who are in my same situation, who are making serious waves, and we can help and collaborate with each other to make sure that not only am I successful, but we're all successful.
Absolutely.
That's good.
There's a question in the chat box about funding. And so not necessarily trying to get in everybody's business, but we just kind of want to get some ideas. And so I mentioned earlier that I did try this entrepreneurial thing, and I would say that 100% of the funds came from my own money in terms of, money that I had saved, particularly money I had saved for my retirement. I basically dumped it into a business. And I'm not sure if you all have done other things in terms to fund your businesses, like proposals, RFPs, or grants or anything like that. So if you can just talk about, how you can generate money to do these types of business ventures.
I can, so that's mainly been my thing. So using my own funds initially as a startup. I've gone into for my brick and mortar, I went into my 401k and pulled some money out for that. But I've also written RFPs and received contracts. So that's been the main source of funding for me. And it really depends on your business. And I think that if you have a great idea, something that's different and unique, doing a crowd fund, or if you have a large family or somebody. I mean, you think about, there's this Facebook group that I belong to, and I watched that group grow to 2 million like in 2 months. And so if everybody in that group contributed $1 to that group, that's $2 million. Mm-hmm. So there's definite ways to doing it, but I do think that there's and I don't want to digress, but I'll have to say this, that we still have to start to build trust within our own selves and our own community. And I've definitely started that. I've taken some risks, some calculated risks. And I think that, there's a stigma around Black women not getting along, and Black people not getting along, and not being able to do business together, and, practically destroying each other, in that process. And I think that there's some opportunity there. There's some work to do, but I am starting with trust. I'm leading with that. I'm showing that, I can be trustworthy, and it's helping me. So that's, another thing that I will tell people is partner with somebody. If you have a specialized skill, you could either partner with somebody who has the same skill, or you can partner with them that have an opposite skill, or a compatible skill. And if they're already up and running, you coming to that platform is a benefit for them. And so you guys can work out the financials, but again, it shows it gives that confidence to corporations and agencies that you can actually do the work because you have a team.
Right. And then one of the things we haven't talked about that was really recommended to me when I started this entrepreneurial journey, and that was to really look at bartering services. So for example, if Loretta or Shonda or Katie were doing something that I wasn't doing, and we could kind of partner and barter, or if I needed an accountant and that person needed my services in HR, that we would kind of barter with each other. There was no money to be exchanged, but at least the services or the skill set that I needed could be done. I know for me, one of the things that I spent a lot of money on was QuickBooks and the whole financial thing, and making sure that my financial statements were together, because that was not my particular expertise. But had I been able to find someone that did have that expertise, perhaps we could have kind of bartered for different things. Shonda,
I was going to say one more thing too, to that point. One of the things that that I would suggest people to recognize is that when you are first starting with your idea and you're doing your research, you'll find that part of that research is going to lead you to a budget and putting your budget together. Many of the things that you do, especially from a startup perspective, I believe it's like $5,000 that you can write off just for your startup expenses. And so when you think about how you leverage that, is if you're working a full-time job and now you've started a part-time running your business, every month you're putting tax dollars, you're paying for taxes. And so, for example, if you pay $25,000 in taxes before you get your, it's time to file, you want to be able to get as much of that $25,000 back. So if you have no children, you're not in school, you don't have, these deductibles, and I know it's different now, where it's more that you can get back. Utilizing a small business is a way to help you with your travel, with your and other business expenses that you're able to write off. And so don't sleep those opportunities to use a formal accountant, use a business consultant, save those receipts, have those records, because those are things that you can write off, and it won't be money to you. I mean, that's the first $5,000 right there that you will have, that you can, as startup costs.
Okay. Question for Alana. So back to your first business, can you talk to us about what that business was, and if you had a business, what your business plan and marketing plan was like?
Absolutely. So my first business was a clothing business. As I mentioned, I am still in apparel. However, it was a different kind of apparel. So growing up, I was an ice skater, and that's actually how I got into fashion. I think it's fair to say a lot of businesses are born out of need. And in my case, it was just that. I was a black figure skater. There weren't a lot of outfits, so to speak, that really fit my body type. I won't lie. As a kid, even you have a little bit more of a shape sometimes. And for me, that meant I needed dresses that covered, because I'm sure you've all seen on TV where they're skating and all of a sudden it's like riding up, or just, it can get, to be not appropriate. So my need for the business was I wanted to have stylish that, well-fitting dresses that were age appropriate. And so that's how I got into fashion. I started because I had the bright idea to, follow after my mom, and in a sneaky way, she was sewing and making all of my clothes growing up. But I didn't really express to her that I wanted to learn. I just kind of took it upon myself to try. And eventually she actually taught me the fundamentals, what I really needed to learn to not hurt myself, because you can actually hurt yourself using a sewing machine at 9 years old if you don't know what you're doing. And I was 9 years old when I started sewing. And so by the time I actually wrote my business plan and started my business plan to create figure skating dresses, custom figure skating dresses, I had already had 5 years of experience doing what I was doing. And so again, that business was birthed out of experience, but also a need, because unfortunately there wasn't as much diversity, and still really isn't as much diversity in the figure skating world. And so we wanted to be able to provide something that you really couldn't find anywhere else. And so that was what my first business plan was based on, was creating figure skating dresses custom.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Well, unfortunately, we are almost running out of time. And so
we extended it to a half an hour for this particular session.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
All right, cool.
Yep.
All right. So what I'd like to do now is just ask each of you to kind of give us some parting words, or just something that you'd like to share that we haven't talked about in the world of entrepreneurship. And I guess we'll start with Katie.
Perfect. So parting words that I will say, and I'm going to keep saying it, we talked a lot about this in today's session, is truly step out and invest in yourself. When you are going into an organization, you are investing into that organization. You're investing in someone else's dream. If you have a dream, it is time today to invest in yourself, right? Because every single day you bet on, I'm going to get a paycheck because I'm going to render this service and they're going to pay me. I can bet on that. I would implore you to bet on yourself. And that's difficult, right? This is a very uncertain field, is going into entrepreneurship. Very uncertain. There's going to be highs, there's going to be lows. Trust me, I feel like I'm speaking to myself as I speak to you guys. But you have to do it, right? I'm going to bet on myself that I'm going to be in a different place 12 months from now if only I invest in myself. And like we've said in this group, network, ask questions, be inquisitive. The only thing that they can say is no, right? So when you're in those networking groups, don't be afraid to say, how much do you charge? Where did you get your liability insurance? Don't be afraid to ask the questions, because someone will help answer them. And don't be afraid to network, because there's enough for all of us, right? So if there is something that I know that maybe is not my forte, right? I've dabbled in diversity inclusion. Do I want to do a diversity inclusion session? Do I want to be the subject matter expert? Absolutely not, right? So I'm going to bring in someone who I feel is an expert, and in hopes that that person will think of me when someone says, you know what, I have a client that has a small union and they're going through a contract negotiation, right? Don't try to put that hat on. Dial me up and say, hey, Katie, I have a potential client for you and I think it's going to work. Use your network to your advantage.
Well, thank you.
Janice, I wanted to say, if we could allow Alana to go, I know that she has to leave, but then afterwards, after everybody says their parting words, I'm willing to stay on and ask, I'm sorry. I'm willing to stay on and ask and answer any like specific questions and kind of help people with some of the ideas and, you know, different things like that. We can stay on to the call to make sure that they get all of their questions answered.
All right, great. All right, Alana.
So a part of what I would like to advise kind of goes along with what Katie was just saying. I mentioned before that the business plan that I have now is nowhere near what I started with. And one of the biggest parts of that was that when I started the business, you know, so many years ago, I was doing it completely by myself. And of course my mom was there to help me, but in terms of like, you know, who was on the board, so to speak, it's just me. I'm the only person that could be answered to. I think what overwhelmed me in the beginning goes along to what she was saying. I was trying to wear way too many hats rather than focusing on my strengths myself and realizing what could be supplemented by someone else. So now in my current business, I'm partner. I still am, you know, I'm still the owner of the business. However, it's much easier, or not even easier, but I think two heads are better than one when it comes to having business. So don't be afraid. I mean, also be careful about who you pick in terms of who you trust and who you would, because the way I see a business, it's like a child. It is something that goes from conception to reality, and who you have on your team is really instrumental to how that is going to go moving forward to you. So one of the strengths I have now is that I am no longer making all the decisions by myself. When I have an idea, you know, we bounce heads together. When I'm working on one aspect of the business, he's working on another. We're not stepping on each other's toes. And so in that way, you've heard the phrase divide and conquer. We're able to get so much more done because I'm not trying to do every aspect by myself. So for instance, if I do the website, he's working on the social media. If I do one part of the production, he's doing another part of the production. And so we're literally able to get more work done just by me not trying to do everything by myself, as well as him too. You know, it's not my partner when I say him. It's not always about how good you can do something, because it can be way more efficient to include other team members, whether it's someone who's a permanent position or whether you do, as Katie said, and you delegate certain work. One thing I really use heavily now is the bartering as well. I've found that to be very helpful in terms of avoiding certain expenses. I do branding and consulting, and so on one aspect, I might do branding for someone, and they might help me with a completely different aspect of business that I just don't have experience with. And so again, having the right team around you and being conscious of, you know, different roles and not trying to wear every hat all the time is really instrumental. That's the piece I would like to leave everyone with.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Shonda.
No problem.
Okay, so I will say before I start my parting words again that I am just so honored to have been a part of this panel today. My parting words would be to not allow fear to paralyze your dreams, but rather motivate them. So my personal story about why I even went into starting my own consulting firm, at the time that I thought about doing this and really jumping into it, I did not have any kids. It was just myself and my fiance. And after I had my daughter, I was actually at work. I think I had reset a Chronos password for probably the 25th time that week. And and I just said, I'm so unhappy. Like, I don't want to do this. And I was thinking about her. I was thinking about her being at home and how I would just be so much more happier if I had the flexibility in my schedule. Yeah. And the second piece is I'm sitting here and I'm like, they're compensating me a lot to do this job. So I feel like other people would compensate me as well to do the same thing, but yeah. I would be in control of myself. I wouldn't have, the executive level stepping on things that I wanted to do. I implement for people, like the best practices that I really felt that the workforce needed. And so that was honestly, I allowed my fear to motivate me. My fear at that time when I thought about it was being in the same position and being unhappy year after year after year after year. And I said, I can't do this anymore. And I literally said, I'm going to use this fear instead of paralyzing my dreams to motivate me out the door and to really take control of what I want. And so I would say to everyone listening, allow that fear to propel you. Don't allow the fear to paralyze you, but allow it to propel you. It's not, I think what's scarier is not, oh my gosh, well, what if I start and what if I fail? I think what's scarier is if you find yourself in the same situation year after year after year, just wondering, what could have happened? I feel like if I had stepped out, as Katie, as you said, stepped out on faith years ago, I would be in a very different predicament than I am right now. But hey, I'm here now and like the rest of us. And so I just encourage people to really just try it. Yeah. There's nothing scary about investing in yourself. There's nothing scary about believing in yourself.
Right.
Well said.
And I think I would say, looking back, just all the resources that the ladies have talked about are really key. If you can take how to start a business class at your local chamber or your local SBA or something like that, don't be in a rush to start, because the more preparation you do, especially while you have a full-time job, maybe you can do things on the weekends and the evenings to get prepared, because the more you prepare, the better you will be when you actually launch the particular business. In my case, one of the things that they asked us to do was to pick a launch date. So you had an actual, ribbon cutting type thing to kind of let the community know this is the day that we're getting started. Kind of partner with like local chambers or different things like that to kind of network and meet people. And I think part of the struggle, at least for me, was I started a business in a place where I didn't know anybody and kind of put myself in a rush to get started. While looking back, I feel like if I had put a lot more time on the front side, we probably would have been a lot more successful. So I would say don't be in a rush, try to do what you can, raise the money if you don't have it on your own. And basically get started. And if you have a product like what Alana was talking about, it may be a little bit easier if you were like a t-shirt maker, you make mugs or whatever the things are. A lot of things are more tangible. HR is not necessarily tangible per se because people can't necessarily see it and touch it, but they know that it's something that can help or help, on the other side. And so some of the times we bring in HR people because of, litigation or, we need to work on engagement or something like that, things that you can't touch. However, but still things that are very, very important on the other side. So that would be my advice, just to do the homework, find out who your resources are, network, join organizations, be able to do some of the things that are free, like advertising or, bartering for different services. Those are things that are definitely very important. All right, Ms. Verretta.
So I was going to say, I'm glad that Shonda talked about fear. Fear is false evidence appearing real. And so don't react to fear until you actually have something to react to.
Right.
But the other thing is start somewhere. So set some goals. We say this in HR, that what gets done is written down. So once you write something down, the statistics show that you will be working towards it. And as from writing down your goals, for the year, or, doing some type of, board or something. Find out what it is for you to motivate yourself to actually do something. Start with a passion though, because that way you'll do it for free. If you're working on something that you're not, happy with, you don't find yourself, that it's not fun. And even those activities that so I was working with a client, and I've committed to do a certain type of work. And when I noticed he didn't have a Facebook page, I went and set up his Facebook page. And, that's not what I like to do. So just because you can do something doesn't mean you want to do it. And so, I managed the expectations with him to say, hey, you know what, I set this up. You're the admin, hire somebody else to, manage this and post for you and do those types of things. So make sure that you don't commit to doing something that you don't like, because it just naturally you won't enjoy it, and which means you won't get it done. And so I would say if there has to be one bit of advice, it is start somewhere, make a goal. And so I'm going to date myself for real. And I'm going to say this. So there was a commercial that used to come on when I was growing up, and it said, if you don't do it for yourself, do it for the loved ones in your life. And so that's the thing that I think about when you talk about legacy building. If you don't have anything to give to your kids, one thing that you can give them is the entrepreneurship spirit, and you can give them a business. And so fortunately, I came from, my dad was a businessman. I remember, as a kid doing his payroll. Now both of my kids are in business for themselves. And so while, you have that flexibility and all that, you're also leaving something for your kids. So thanks.
Yeah, it's definitely about legacy. And if you think about some of the famous entrepreneurs, especially in the African American community, like people like the Johnson family, who have a entire publishing company. There are lots of people who own restaurants that, like McDonald's franchises, those things that they can only give to their children or sell them themselves. Those are things that definitely can leave a legacy. I know people who own car dealerships, and as car dealer owners, that's something that they can leave as a legacy, and then that's something that will be on forever. Growing up in Atlanta, there were a lot of African American, especially entrepreneurs in a variety of different things. So from car dealerships to owning McDonald's, and so those are things that definitely set your family and your generations to come apart from other people, because it's generational wealth. So those are definitely things that you can do. And then we also talked about partnering with other people and using and bartering people for their particular services. Because again, if you don't have to pay for an accountant that's $300 an hour because you're able to provide some goods and or services to them, those are definitely things that will help you as a business be well. But definitely want to thank all of these women today for coming out and sharing their expertise. I know that sometimes we don't necessarily all stick together, but this is one where we are all on one accord. I definitely thank you all for your participation. I want to remind you that we have a few upcoming sessions on a variety of HR topics. On next Wednesday, which is August the 26th, there's going to be a session called What Companies Don't Tell You, Human Resources Secrets Revealed. On September the 9th, we're going to talk about social media. You can't hide in the inside. On September the 16th, there's going to be Recruiting is a One-Night Stand, Keys to Marrying That Perfect Role. And then on September the 23rd, we're going to have the SHRM, which is the Society of Human Resource Managers, Black Chapter Presidents, Part 2. And so again, if you've got particular topics that you want to know about, we're here almost every Wednesday with a new topic and different things that we can talk about in the field of HR. So if you are an entrepreneur, these are definitely things that will help you if you're working in corporate America or whatever you're doing in your own professional life. These are definitely things that can help you. So on the screen, you'll see the upcoming event schedule. Will ask you to pay attention to Eventbrite, to LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, etc. And those are ways that you can get information out. So again, we want to thank all of our panelists again for coming out today and participating. And we appreciate all of the audience members, either whether you're joining on Facebook Live or you're joining on Zoom. Thank you for that, and look forward to getting a copy of this presentation through your own email system, and then also please feel free to share this information that others of like-minded, such that they can use this information to either enhance their own careers or enhance their own professional lives. And thank you again. And I know
So Janice, before you close though, I do want to highlight the HR After Dark session that we added.
okay.
So that's a bonus session, and this came from a Facebook posting with one of my colleagues who talked about the article that came out about the state of Black women in corporate America. And so we're calling this the After Dark because we do want to have some true, genuine conversations. And in that, we want to start empowering people to have conversations, you know, in their jobs, and to, you know, again, we had, you know, earlier I talked about the difference between equity and parity. And so we want to help prepare people to start grooming their organizations for some of the changes that we want. And then finally, I'm going to share the businesses of the participants today, of our panels today, and acknowledge that we have those. Let me make sure that I'm starting on the right slide. Okay, here we go. So this is Katie Brown's information. And so again, these recordings are, these presentations are recorded. And so I want to make sure that we get those in the recording, and you can go back and get the information later. And this one is with Shonda and her organization, My HR. This is Alana's Chasor, and how to get in touch with her on Instagram. And then this is the Mann HR Group that's sponsoring this session. So that's all that we have. And what I wanted to do next is, if our panelists have to leave, I understand, but I want to make sure that we leave some time for our guests to ask specific questions about their businesses or upcoming businesses. And I want to use this time to be able to provide some consulting if I can, and, you know, as our panelists can too, to answer any questions that you have.
So there is a question in the chat that talks about how do you get training in terms of RFPs. So when you see an RFP or you want to respond to it, and you don't, and that's not your expertise, how do you get the training to actually respond to those things?
Okay, so I didn't get trained, if you will, but I am aware that, especially like here in Los Angeles, and I would say many of the metropolitan cities and even small cities. So these types of classes that we talked about with the SBA, those are usually affiliated with colleges and nonprofits, but I would suggest contacting your college, some of the churches, some community organizations, such as the NAACP may have something, or the Urban League. Look for those organizations. They have programs that are funded. And I was just talking to a colleague of mine who received a grant to be part of an initiative here in Los Angeles. And so they put her through this program with, you know, several others. They learn how to prepare and provide the information for their minority business enterprise certification. And they get partnered with a corporation. So they learn how to write the RFP. They submit the RFP. They're automatically going to get the RFP with that company, and that starts the process for them. So this is the time to utilize, so do your research and find out. Some of you may be as bold as I am, and that is find the work first and then fit what I do into what they're asking for. And so if you are, you know, if you have a specialty and you're not willing, so one of my partners, she's in recruiting and that's her thing and that's all she does, but I will go outside of HR. I will do compensation. I do data analysis, data cleanup, you know, in a company, process re-engineering. So I look for the work that needs to be done, and then I fit my, you know, my skill set into that work. And when I write the RFP. And there are 2 of them out there. So once you get your certification, then you'll get emails. You can set yourself up to get emails on bids that are coming through, and you become, familiar with that process, and people will look for you. So with one of my partners, she gets an email to say, hey, I think you would be great, for this, put a bid in.
So there's another question about the upcoming topics and how people register. So Brett, if you would talk about how people might register for some of the upcoming topics.
So we use Eventbrite, and I use the header, the building series. So when you're searching in Eventbrite and you're looking for the building series, you'll see what is the subject matter that we will have for that particular week. Also on my website, mannhrcg.com, there's a tab for HR for all people. And so on that page, we keep that up to date with previous videos, Zoom, recordings of conferences that we've already had, as well as the updated calendar for the other events. And so that will be a link to register for the new events coming up. And we're always looking for new topics. So after this, you will receive a survey, and it'll, ask you for your general feedback about the session, but also give you an opportunity to add additional topics. We're pretty much finished with our schedule for September, but we'll be looking at, what we do in October. So as long as we have the interest and the demand, we will continue to have these sessions.
Okay. So there's another question on here, and I'm not sure if Shonda or Katie answered it, but it was about insurance. So the question was really about, at what point should you start getting your liability insurance?
Yeah, I think
Answer that,
Shonda.
sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
What I
Shonda
said is
answered.
I got it at the very beginning prior to starting any work. I mean, just because exactly what Katie said, it's better to be safe than sorry. And it's super affordable. I don't know if everyone saw the comments there, but my provider is Hiscox, so I pay $55 a month. And to me, I think, $55 a month compared to like if, something happens that's way out of my scope, then I'm super covered, and so are my clients.
And there's
I
also,
was going to add to that. So depending on the type of work that you do, you may get errors and omissions, you may get liability insurance. And I would suggest, working with a business consultant. Again, it's rarely, it's, $25 to $50, generally, and they can give you some idea based on your business. So when you think about the risk of your business, that's what insurance is for. So for example, if I'm consulting in health and wellness, and I'm actually working with people to, correct, certain positions, with fitness, that we're doing some type of fitness exercise, and I'm showing them how to do it, and I'm, working with them, the insurance is going to be very different than if I'm sitting in front of them in a computer and I'm saying, this is what I'm recommending, and allowing them to make the final decision. So some insurance, yes, you definitely, it's about you being liable, and it's about you not wanting them to come after your own personal assets. So as you're setting up your business and you're making sure, am I going to be a sole proprietor? I suggest, and then, again, this is a recommendation, we put our disclaimer out there, but I suggest, if you're starting as a consultant, to start out as a sole proprietor first, unless you're all in. It's so easy to transition from a sole proprietor to an LLC or a corporation. Make sure that, you're all in before you start, that additional investment. Now, some people may say, and I've done this before, where I've sunk some money into a business because it forced me to be all in, but that doesn't necessarily work. I mean, you could just be, oh, well, that money's gone. I'm not, invested anymore. So, that's what I would say is find out what, based on the type of business that you have, you cannot guarantee that the corporate, the corporations that you work with, your clients, will have business that will have insurance that insure you. So you do want to have your own insurance, but it depends on, the amount of liability depends on what you're actually doing.
Right. And then, yeah, to clarify too, Brett, I had a friend who asked me about my insurance, and she did not disclose exactly what she was trying to do in my accountability partner group. So recruitment, if you're doing like staffing, anything on site, is a totally different ball game than exactly what you stated, the sole proprietorship and just being a consultant. So that was a mess for her to figure out. So I back 100% the suggestion that you said, which was consult with a business consultant, somebody who could actually guide you in the right direction.
Right.
And in my case, my company was a franchise organization, and my liability and E&O was a whole lot more expensive than that.
Mm-hmm.
Because
And it requires it, right?
Because I was doing like group coaching as well as like training classes and that kind of stuff. And so when you're going to, let's say a hotel or a conference center or whatever to host an event, then you have to have a whole lot more insurance than when you're meeting with somebody over a Zoom meeting. So just those things alone, you just become, a little bit more expensive than that. So again, it really depends on you having your business plan, you sharing that with the insurance agent about what your own particular needs are. And again, everybody's needs are definitely going to be different.
Right. And the other thing too is that utilizing the SBA, that's one of the best resources that you can have. Not only do they have a ton of information on their website, and when I say a ton, I mean templates. So every type of document that you would think you would need, you can find that on their website. And, it may seem overwhelming to go on that website and see, it's like, oh, they want me to do all of this, but it's worth it to learn everything you can on the front end, because, it's the best way I can say is, how do you unscramble eggs? Yeah. And I mean, and this is, and I don't know, I think maybe I'm now at my 6th or 7th business right now.
Oh, wow.
So you definitely want to make sure that you have, that you can sustain, that the business can sustain itself. So that's the whole purpose of writing the plan. The other piece is making sure that you have the right audience to buy your product. And so if you have a great product and nobody's buying it, you have to figure out, well, do I stop doing this thing and go to something else? Or what is it that they're willing to buy? And one of the stories that I talk about is when I'm consulting is, if you have, if people are so invested in certain things, like this is my grandmother's cake recipe, and, everybody's saying the cake is so great and I want to sell this cake. If you get to a point where people just want to buy your icing, then can you just sell the icing? No, I can't. I just got to sell this cake and it's got to be so. So you have to make a decision on, do I want 2 sales with this cake in the full package, or do I want a multi-million-dollar business because now my icing is all over the country? I watched a lot of Shark Tank. I remember when that show first came on, and I learned a lot of things from that. And I don't know if I mentioned it here, but I did a pitch for Shark Tank on a business that I had, and it was too premature, and I knew that going in. It's basically, as you know, Shark Tank wants to know how much your revenue is, and I was pitching an idea, and so they loved the idea, and they brought me back in for the second phase. But even the second phase, it wasn't long enough for me to really grow the business. The other thing that I was going to say, manage your expectations around growing your business. Most businesses don't become profitable until after 3 years. And so if you can launch a business and start to get profit right away, that's good. But make sure that you are, not feeling discouraged because your business isn't moving, as fast as you want to. It takes time. It literally takes time. So.
And not only time, that's why you need to have your financial situation in order, because can you sustain yourself without your corporate paycheck or whatever else you have on for that time period until it becomes profitable?
Because that goes away, doesn't it? When you quit your job, that goes away. And so unless you have something else, I fortunately, when I first started my business, I was married and had military insurance. And so that was a big expense that I didn't have to pay. But when you start to having to pay your own insurance and your own Social Security and your own, into your own 401k or your Roth IRA or whatever you're using for your investment, that starts to add up, and you have to weigh your costs.
Right.
Starting off small and seeing, do I really like it? And it's okay to change. I'm okay with it. As my daughter said, she's been in several businesses. Her ice skating business went into designing women's clothes to designing bridal gowns and bridesmaids dresses. And so you can always think about your business evolving.
Right. Okay.
Any more questions in the chat?
Let's see. No, there are no more questions.
Okay. I'll give you guys one more minute to, if you need to say something. Let me just put my glasses on so I can see if there's anything. Yeah, Katie, that was a great quote that you had.
Oh, wait a minute, there is a question. Someone says their business is in the hair and skincare line of business. Is it recommended to have a sole proprietorship or an LLC? And then they say, I think I need a business consultant.
Right. So let's talk about that. And I have I think a very pointed view around not just the skincare, but the, the hair and the makeup and, all of those things. I haven't done the numbers, but a part of me believes that market may be oversaturated. And what I mean by that is a lot of people are doing it. You have the Mary Kay people who are still, I don't know what their numbers are, but, people are going strong, in that space. And then you have, in the African American, lines that are coming through. And so there's a ton of people out there doing the same thing, very much like consultants. And so the thing is, what is making your piece different, than somebody else's, and then how your product's different, and then how do you get your product to somebody like Michelle Obama, right? Did you guys see the necklace? Did you see when she did her on the Democratic conference? She had on a necklace that said "Vote." I did not notice the necklace. I watched the whole thing. I listened to her. I didn't notice the necklace. And then it was the news later that showed where the originator, the designer of that necklace came through and said, when she saw it, she said, I just cried. She said that was just a moment where, because obviously it is now blown up and she got that Oprah effect, if you will. So that's the thing that I think you should always keep in top of mind is, how do you prepare for something like that to happen? Or are you comfortable with, do the numbers on your line? And I know I kind of went off on the subject. I'm sorry, I got something in my eye. I went off on the subject, and I want to make sure that I answer your questions. So Janice, you may have to help me again, but do the numbers on anything that you're trying to sell, whether it's a service or a product, and say to yourself on paper, I need to have this amount of business in order for me to sustain the cost of living that I need to enjoy.
Right. And
have that real conversation with yourself. Because if you're selling skincare products and you're purchasing them for, let's just say $1, and you're selling them for 10, that's $9. How many of those do you need to sell for that to be a salary for you? So make sure, that would be one of my things, because it's a lot of that going out, a lot of that out there. I had a friend of mine who, and the way that it's being marketed is, we'll do your website, we'll do this, and they're showing you can run your own business. But then when you go on there and you look at the products that's on the website, a lot of us like to touch and feel our products. Even during COVID, we were like, nope, I need to, see what, this hair care stuff is going to feel like and what it does. And you have, a market who says, I don't care. I'm not really trying to shop. Like, give me the cheapest thing, the most inexpensive product on Amazon. So that's who if you're competing against Amazon, think about what that means.
Right.
So did I answer the question, or did I?
Yes, you did. So there's one more question about, oh, go ahead.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
was you gonna say something?
I think, did we address if it should be a proprietor or a LLC? Because that one was
right.
very pointed.
That was my.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Do you want to go ahead, Katie? Or do you want me to?
So I think you said it earlier. I think that it's important to definitely start as a sole proprietor because it's very simple and easy to switch it to a LLC. If it's my personal advice, if you're starting a hair care or skincare line, I'm assuming that you're creating the product yourself, and maybe you're doing a bulk service for some of your packaging. I think a sole proprietor is fine. And again, if your service or company launches, you can easily make the switch to a LLC.
Right. And I think that what will motivate you to start as a corporation is if you already have a big contract and that's what they're requiring.
Correct.
If you have that and they're requiring that, then you have the backing. But if you're investing in this and you're just starting out for yourself and you don't know where, if I'm going to like this thing in 3 months, 6 months, 2 weeks, this is the time to start off as a sole proprietor. And what that means is that you can get an EIN number, which is free. It's an employee identification number that you get with the IRS. You get that EIN number, and that separates your business from your social security number, but it does not separate your business from you.
Correct.
So you are still, the business and you are still one unit, which means any liability is going to be on you, but manage your risk. Because if you're giving advice and you're saying, if you're giving recommendations, then you say, like we do with this Zoom, so we're not giving advice, so you manage that so that when people, and make sure you have contracts in place and you have things in place to protect you. But I would say start just as you're under your name. So Veretta Yancey, I'm doing business at, one of my businesses, HR for All People, for example, is under my name. It has its own EIN number. And so the government can associate it, but when I file my taxes, I'm not filing a separate tax form as I did with another business that I had. I'm literally filing my taxes through my own individual tax, and I'm accounting for the business in a Schedule C, and you can account for multiple businesses in a Schedule C and they'll recommend that if the businesses are different. It's the same if you're doing consulting for this company and consulting for this company, the IRS is going to be like, okay, what? But if you're doing consulting in this company and you're doing coaching, for basketball in this company, then you can say these are two different companies.
Mm-hmm.
And there's another question in the chat box around how you know what your niche is, especially when you're talking about HR. So you might be a person that wants to do recruiting or staffing. There might be employee relations. Some people are, Katie talked about her experience dealing with unions and union workers or labor, and so it just really kind of depends on what you consider your expertise is and what you're passionate about. So in my case, I'm really passionate about coaching. I'm also passionate about talent acquisition. And in the world of HR, if you ask me if I would do some consulting on HRIS, which is HR information systems, that would be a no, because I'm not passionate about it. I don't have any expertise and I would fail if that was my business. So I think a lot of it has to do with what you're passionate about as a person. And there are people who are passionate about the total everything in HR. I'm just not one of them. So again, it just really depends on your own background and experiences and what you've been trained to do. And I think that's what a lot of the panelists did talk about today, is that their own expertise, and they basically turn that expertise and experience into a quote unquote business.
And what you do for free. So
right.
What are those things? So when you think about your day-to-day job, because I've been there and I know what that means. I know what it looks like where they've hired you to do one thing and you're doing that, But then when they say, well, we need volunteers to do such and such, you're over there raising your hand saying, I want to do this. And that's how I got my experience in D&I. I mean, I started D&I experience, corporate D&I experience. I know that I've been advocating, you know, pretty much my whole life for people and, you know, human rights. But my D&I experience initiated when I formed a affinity group, is what we called it at the time, or networking group, and now they call it a resource group. But it was basically putting, you know, that team together and showing value to the business. I mean, we wrote a business case and a proposal to the organization to really share the value that we bring to the organization, not to just look at us as employees, but understanding that us as a collective could actually make a difference to the business. So do what I would say, start off doing something that you like doing. Another, I would say, feeder into that is doing some volunteer work. So that's another way to get your foot in the door, to also get experience. Volunteering with companies, that's great experience that you can put on your business resume, to be able to say, this is what I did for this organization. They don't know, they don't need to know that you did it for free, but, you know, of course, the organization that you're doing the work for is going to appreciate it and give you rave reviews, which you will need to bring in more business. So it's one of those things, you know how, you know, we make that statement about you need money to get money. The same thing about growing your business is you have to show a past history of, you know, good client work in order to gain additional clients.
Absolutely. There's one last question, and it says, it's getting late on the East Coast, and they're trying to find a link for upcoming events. So I know that they're going to get a survey. Is there going to be a link on the survey that takes them to upcoming events as well?
So right now, I have not put the link out there for the event for Wednesday, but just know that every Wednesday, they will get, when the response, I send a note to everybody who's attended the conference. When I send you the link to the survey and the recording, I will also send a link to the new sessions that are started. And so I think that's a good idea, to go ahead and put the additional things out there and go ahead and block them on the calendar, even though I may not have the marketing done, but we know at least the dates and the speakers and all that good stuff. So I'll do that. That'll be some of my homework. So thanks.
Okay.
But yes, it is getting late. Thank you so much, everybody. This was
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for participating, and definitely look forward to seeing all of you at a next session. Again, next week will be same time, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.